Mayor, what's the situation right now?
The situation is that two airplanes have attacked apparently.
He had made this colossal mistake of locating the command center in the only complex that had already been attacked by Islamic fundamentalists and that they vowed to return to.
The command center was built, but it was built in the wrong place, within the World Trade Center complex, the very place that had been attacked in 1993.
Why was he running that day and running around? Because he didn't have a command post, because he put it in the wrong place.
He had, put his bunker right in the most dangerous spot in the city for terrorists.
It was located there solely and completely because of Rudy Giuliani.
You put the Emergency Response Command Center in the World Trade Center in 1997, even though your director of emergency management recommended that you not put it there because it had been a target in 1993. Why'd you do that?
My director of emergency management recommended 7 World Trade Center.
I have no idea what he's talking about. Because we had already had a bombing in Lower Manhattan, and because I felt that Lower Manhattan would remain a target, that the best location would be out in Brooklyn.
I have got a copy right here of Jerry Hauer's directive to you, and there were meetings in which Jerry Hauer said that it's a bad idea, and the police chief, Howard Safer, said it was a bad idea?
Jerry Hauer recommended that.
He gets caught by Chris Wallace lying.
Then why did he say the building, he said it's not, the place in Brooklyn is not as visible a target as buildings in Lower Manhattan.
He recommended that site as the site that would be the best site. It was largely on his recommendation that site was selected.
It's just a flat-out lie. All the other options were taken away, and we kept being pushed back towards 7 World Trade Center. It was very clear the mayor was not going to go anywhere else but Lower Manhattan.
And we also had backup centers at the police department in Brooklyn. We had another backup center, and we had a virtual command center.
He has no idea what he's talking about. There was no virtual command center. We did not have a virtual capability outside of 7 World Trade Center. Again, he pulls words and ideas out of the air, but they're simply not true. The mayor told me that he'd like it in Lower Manhattan, within walking distance.
It was simply a situation of that facility being within walking distance of City Hall.
He felt that it'd be easier to get the press someplace near City Hall.
As a professor of fire science and related issues, emergency response and things, walking distance should never have anything to do with where you place an emergency operations center.
The city agreed to rent the vacant 23rd floor of World Trade Center 7 from Larry Silverstein, the leaseholder of the building, for $1.4 million a year for 20 years.
These politically wired people in the Giuliani administration came up with the World Trade Center floor as the ideal floor for this location.
There was a lot of opposition to it. I mean, certainly within the rank and file people involved in emergency management and those kind of issues and things.
I, at that point, didn't know of Rudy's relationship with the owner of that building.
To return the favor, Silverstein held a $100,000 fundraiser for Rudy on his yacht a month after the command center opened.
If you were not with him 100% and didn't support him 100%, they would basically cut your throat.
It cost the lives of first responders that day because the command center was located at the World Trade Center.
There were 60 firefighters killed in the Marriott. There was 121 killed in the North Tower, and the rest were killed in the South Tower. What would have been different had that command center been operational? The death toll for firefighters would probably have been cut in half. A lot of guys wouldn't have been going into the buildings or heading up the stairs, they would have been heading out. And probably guys in the North Tower would have gotten that message.
Making sure, for example, that if fire companies or groups of police officers are being brought into the scene, that they end up at the right locations. You know, we know, for example, that on 9/11, a lot of companies, it was very confusing to them because a lot of them had never been there before in the sense of responding to that complex, didn't actually know the numbering system of the buildings and things like that. And that's a situation where that emergency operations center could play a much better role and be able to coordinate that kind of stuff.
Giuliani should have been like someplace roaring, screaming to people to get out, run, you know, run. But he ran himself.
He abandoned ship. He was a coward that day. The real hero stayed to help people out and protect them.
Running on the street because he wasn't in the command center, that running played out in the media as being this on the street tough guy.
Television played a really critical role for Mayor Giuliani on 9/11. We certainly saw him at the disaster scene as soon as the buildings began to collapse, moving away from that area.
When you objectively look at the before, during, and after, there's really not much you can find that Rudy did right except for a very good television appearance.
I really don't know what he did that was so good. I know what my brother did. I know what the police officers did and what some of the really brave civilians did, but I certainly don't know what he did beyond looking really good on television.
Did not work, the communication of World Trade Center, and that day was horrible in '93.
It was well documented that these radios didn't work, and then the signal wasn't strong enough to communicate.
The other principal problem with the radios is that the fire department radios couldn't communicate with the police department radios. This is called interoperability.
What did Mr. Giuliani do from the beginning of his administration? He had 8 years. He did nothing to correct that situation. We got people dead as a result.
After years of inaction, the Giuliani administration finally ordered new radios in 2001. Radios that were never field tested and obtained from Motorola in a no-bid contract.
Spring of 2001, brand new radios are introduced. They're introduced without any pilot testing.
They just ordered these radios on their own, they never field tested them, and they never did anything.
So not only did they take forever to deal with the radio problem, they made all the wrong decisions up the line in picking the radio that would be used.
When these new radios were put in service, they lasted 1 week.
Within a week, the new inadequate radios almost killed a firefighter when his mayday went unheard that he was lost. So it took them 8 years to give us radios that had never been tested.
There was a lot of skullduggery, as I call it, that went on between Motorola and the city of New York.
The thing was that they've always bought only Motorola. They would never buy anybody else's, and they'll create enough obstacles so it makes it, there's no way you can win it.
Why was everybody else closed out of bidding on this?
Motorola has a very overly close relationship with the communications people in the city. Far too close than any vendor I've ever seen. And it's not a good thing.
So here you have a contract that goes from $1.something million to $14 million in a weekend. Things just don't add up.
The new radios had to be recalled as a result of their complete failure. Firefighters were reissued the old radios that malfunctioned in 1993. And on 9/11, the consequences would prove to be deadly.
It's documented that the police in the helicopter saw the towers leaning and knew the towers were ready to come down.
They're up in the sky, they're looking at the towers, they're predicting the partial collapse, at least of both towers, 10, 15 minutes before either tower collapsed.
They issued a vacate order for, and who heard it was the cops.
And the police, got out of the area. That information was never relayed to us.
Not a single cop was lost in the North Tower, because they had heard the message.
121 firefighters in North Tower didn't have that option.
Exactly what's going on, Kate. We are unable to make any kind of communication.
Their radios failed them, and that was Giuliani failing them.
Their willingness, the way I describe it, to stand their ground and not retreat. And the fact that so many of them interpreted it that way kept a much calmer situation and a much better evacuation.
To say they heard the command to get out and didn't.
And disobeyed their orders. No.
It was such an unbelievable statement.
That our sons practically wanted to die. I know for sure, like, our son would definitely have come out. Like, he was just so living. Like, he so wanted to live.
I didn't take the job to commit suicide.
The media is not digging in and trying to really find out about Motorola.
I want to know why Motorola got the contract when they could not provide the department with an adequate radio, and why they were given such an outrageous contract. That's what I want to know.